I'd been telling myself I wanted to write like a feature film script forever. And I was like, now's the time, man.
This episode is brought to you by Portfolio Box, an online portfolio made by creatives for creatives. Hey guys, it's Hardwood Rod here, and it's a new season. It's time to showcase your new work, and there's no better time than now than to use Portfolio Box. Use my promo code ROD, ROQ50, and get 50% off for 12 months. That's ROD, ROQ50. And check out portfoliobox.net today. Hey guys, welcome to Season 2 of the Hardwood Rod Podcast. And we're kicking off the new season with author and filmmaker Daniel Hess. Hope you guys enjoy the show. All right, guys, we are back for another podcast. And as you guys saw on my story yesterday, we did a little prank, as my potential guest, and we had The Rock join on my podcast, and a lot of people actually believed it. But for all you guys that actually believed it, thank you for believing in me, I guess. But it's moving back to our regular scheduled program. The start to this year, it's been amazing. Bringing on different guests, filmmakers, and people in the business side of things. But today's guest, I don't know him personally, but I am interested to dive into his story. He's a filmmaker and an author. Daniel Hess joins the podcast today. Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, man. I appreciate it.
I'm excited to dive in. I haven't really read your little novel there, but from what I hear, there's a lot to crack in there, and I'm excited just to dive into it and just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what are you doing right now?
Yeah, so I'm as you said, writer, filmmaker from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm born and raised here, and I'm just been creative all my life, and it's sort of been writing first, and then filmmaking actually came much later in my life. So it's been an interesting journey into both mediums that's kind of taken place in my life.
Okay. So your first passion, your first love, you would say it was writing at a young age, you would say.
Yeah, I mean, the writing kind of came out of the dark place of, when I was young, I lost my cousin to cystic fibrosis, and we
Mm.
were really close. So, writing became like a catharsis to kind of let those emotions that happened from that experience out.
Sure.
Um, and so that was kind of the start of like my creative spark in life. And a lot of that came in the form of, small little stories or a lot of poetry that I'd written when I was younger. And so that kind of was the starting point for me creatively. And then film didn't really come in until probably like my teenage years, really, is when that started kind of coming about.
So, I mean, some would say, right, you could, filmmaking and storytelling is one and the same, because in the end, filmmaking, you're telling a story, right, through motion pictures. And so that kind of angle per se was pretty natural for you, right? Because you're pretty much, depending on the field you're doing, you're telling a story, so you're almost writing, but with a camera, right?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the approach that you're taking. It just really didn't cross my mind until, you know, as I got older, I would sit down and like watch films, especially with like my dad, and I can remember him pointing out certain things. Like specifically, I can remember us watching like Back to the Future, and he would point out like, when he goes back, there's like it was called the Twin Pine Mall, but then when he goes back in time and destroys one of the pine trees at the farmer's house, he comes
Yeah.
back and it's the Lone Pine Mall. So just noticing that like films could have this like huge world around them was really kind of eye opening for me. And I was really close friends with somebody who was way into film that I was friends with in high school, and he's actually the one that kind of was like, you like writing stories and you like trying to make characters. Why not just try to make that into a visual thing? And so it kind of just hit me, and it stuck kind of ever since.
Going back, your our childhood pretty much defines us. When we look back and we remember those memories, they stick out because those are those memories that they're a representation of who we were and who we want to be. So as I'm 33, sometimes you want to still be a child, right? Sometimes you still want to be and go back in that time and
Hmm.
relive those moments, right? We all have an inner child inside of us. And elaborate a little bit on the novel you wrote, right? So you're an author. Now, the book, Just a Boy Blaming Himself. Now, that title says a lot. Now, when you're saying just a boy, I'm assuming some of those written poetries, right?
Yeah, it's a poetry collection.
So you're revisiting those memories. Talk to us about Just a Boy Blaming Himself and why the title.
Yeah, so all of my sort of poetry kind of comes from, I guess, assessing like personal things that I'm kind of going through, either in the moment of just sort of getting those out that I'm like feeling, or just reflecting back on just like memories of the past.
Hmm.
And the title really does come from, that feeling of you you know I'm 30, so it's just like that feeling of like you're grown up, but like you don't feel grown up. It's like this weird thing where it's just you would
Yeah,
think that like after a certain point you would kind of stop feeling like almost like a kid in some ways, but it kind of
I feel you.
doesn't stop. so so the title really comes from this reflection of just like reflecting on life and thinking about, okay, are like the issues and mistakes that I've made in life, is this all on me, or is this something that life is presenting me? It's just like that thought of kind of like placing all the blame of, your own decisions and the things that have kind of shaped you, kind of putting those all at your feet. Even though it's something you shouldn't do, it just is one of those things that I think we all kind of have those moments of like just feeling that way, of just saying, man, like this is all my fault, or this is all, things that I could have done better with my life. So that's really where that title sort of is born out of.
And is there one, you know, poetry that stands out, like right off the bat, if they ask you, hey, can you just talk to us about just one feature in the book?
Um, I mean, there's so many that like I look back and reflect on, and I'm trying to like, it's funny because the way I write like my poetry is very much it's I call it like flash moments where I
Okay.
just sort of have like all of a sudden it's all these like kind of thoughts that sort of come over me, and I just start writing things down. Like that's what it's been so important, like just having, the notepad app on like my smartphone, because that's pretty much exclusively where I end up writing everything, because it
Yeah.
all just sort of like hits me at once.
Yeah, that's kind of how it is. I use the same thing for any sort of ideas that just, just randomly just hit my head. And so I feel you, man. I think, we could all relate to, as far as what you call the flash moments, right?
Yeah, it's something that's like it's weird because it's just like this hit of just everything, and it's almost like all these like flashing lights and everything else, so it's just all of this energy that sort of just comes out. And it's crazy because like I feel like as any artist goes through, we all have moments where, we're trying to create and we're doing it, and we have that like moment of questioning ourselves. We get to this point where we start thinking, man, like, is this good enough? Am I doing something that's good enough for the world? But what's nice about, writing the poetry, it allows me to sort of break away from that, because it's so quick and it's so sudden that like I avoid altogether that voice that's just like, man, is this any good? you know, so it really keeps me away from that, which is a nice kind of like refresher because I feel like I do that 90% of the time whenever I'm writing anything of longer substance.
No, I get you. And as far as the cover of the book, talk to us about the cover. What made you decide on just to give the audience a little bit of an illustration? So I'm assuming it's a tub with some sort of like a shadow with the moon in the background, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, so it's a shadow slash like ghost type of
Okay.
figure.
Yeah.
Um, And actually, like, I was trying to figure out what to do for the cover, and I was just online, and I'm in like a Facebook group for people who are like do illustrations and artistry work, and I came across the gentleman who would end up doing the cover, and I think he's based in Spain, I want to say, and he was doing these like Instagram posts with these cool like ghosts that were in like everyday environments,
Hmm.
and it was just this moment where I was like, that is like the exact style of like what I was thinking about in my head. It just, I didn't see it until I saw like his work. And so
Yeah.
I immediately reached out to him and was just like, hey, I have this book of poetry. The themes I think like fit, what you're doing perfect. And so I asked him and commissioned him, and he made up a couple mock ups, and that was the one that ended up winning out. But yeah, just one of those weird things that just within a day of looking into it, I just found like the perfect match for the book.
Yeah, and the book, is there any illustrations inside the book or they're just poetry?
No, it's just poetry once you get
Okay.
into the book itself.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll definitely check it out, man. It looks very interesting, and from what I see, it's you go in deep. It's a lot of a lot of people. In my I think my last guest, we talked about how vulnerability is something that you don't see often, and the audience, readers, viewers can relate. To you when you leave yourself out there. You
Hmm.
become vulnerable to the world basically, right? And we're talking about how stories, when you're telling a story and you're putting yourself in that vulnerable situation, you get more out of that. You get more out of the subject and the audience because you're leaving it all out on the line, and you get to extract more emotion, right? You get to extract
Yeah,
more feeling for both sides.
yeah, exactly. I mean, you really have to be willing to do that because I think if you're not, you're not being true to yourself, and then I feel like the audience sort of sees past that. It's
Yeah.
one of those things where if you're holding back, like, or you're just assessing what you're trying to say too much, I think it just people pick up on that very quickly, and people are a lot better at like seeing that. But yeah, I think it pays off way more when you're just being genuine and you are being vulnerable. I mean, that's what art really. I feel like the best art sort of comes out of a lot of vulnerability or like a deep place of just maybe sadness or something that you're kind of tackling in your own life,
Yeah.
but that it comes out, it shows like in droves in the final product.
Yeah, and it's just human nature, but it seems that every time, you know, for us to get motivated or just to come out, right, it has to be negative, or like, it's more of
Mm,
you see, songwriters, when they're singing, they're talking about a situation or, an ex, right? It always seems that, as humans, we I wouldn't say we strive for those, dark places, right, that we come out of, but it sure, as hell kind of gives us a little boost, right? Just to get our
oh
brains
yeah,
going.
it really does, and this might be like putting putting some poor taste out there or whatever in my musical selections, but I'm a big fan of Fallout Boy of all
Okay.
things, and I would always joke with like friends who are also into them. But if you look at like their songwriting capabilities, and it's like the best albums that they have is has sort of was born out of Pete Wentz, who's the main songwriter for the group, when he was
Mhm.
like struggling with like suicide or dealing with like
Yeah.
terrible breakups. But now that they're like really well established and he's in a comfortable place in his life, like the songwriting is honestly, at least in my opinion, not as good. But it's
Yeah.
like it's interesting that that sort of happens, that it's like you take the same person who can write at a level he can write at, but then put him in a very comfortable position where there's not a lot of struggle anymore, and it sort of has a negative impact on the musical capabilities that are going on.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of that thing, right? It's that where I even heard even some artists put themselves in a bad situation on purpose just for them
Mhm.
to get some sort of content out of it, you know? And I mean, it's human nature, like I said. But that's true, right? Like once I mean at some point, you're not gonna be always pushing out stuff that's gonna be like, I'm happy, right? Because I
Yeah,
don't know, I feel like I feel like the best stuff. I mean, at least for me, right? We kind of strive over obstacles, right? We need to have
mhm,
obstacles, on a daily basis, right? Because if we just have it's kind of just it's easy every day. We don't have to overcome anything. I feel like then what's the point, right? I think we have to, the first step is getting out of bed. That's the first obstacle.
yeah,
So, we have to have these obstacles throughout the day, and I feel like, the audience, yourself and myself, if we don't have that sort of kind of struggle, that obstacle, you know, that roadblock, then we don't have that motivation to go, right? Like why are you doing it? You have to have a purpose.
exactly. No, exactly. It's so true, and it's interesting because I think you know there is like obviously marketability for those moments of like art that's sort of, I don't want to say it's not bad art, but it's just art that's like meant to be a good feeling thing, like that the happy songs or the
Mhm.
movies that you sit down and watch that sort of aren't challenging in any kind of way. So I think like it's funny because I think people go through sort of two sides to it, where it's you need those like dark moments of that you're dealing with, but then also in the media side of things. But then obviously there's also a huge demand for having those sillier, campier things that sort of like can take you out of those moments too.
Yeah, that's so true. Now, moving on to, I just want to get your take, as we're on this topic,
Hmm.
since, as far as consumerism, what's your favorite film right now?
So right now, I actually just recently watched a movie. It's an older movie. It's from the '50s called The Night of the Hunter, which
Okay.
was it's a Robert Mitchum is like the lead in it, and he plays like this preacher who kind of preys on widows and stuff in order to like get money out of them, and he actually goes on kind of like a, not a murderous streak, but like pretty close to it.
Yeah.
And the whole story is like him trying to get money from a guy that he was in prison with, who ends up getting executed, and he goes back to his home and ends up marrying the guy's ex-wife and all this craziness just to try to get this like $10,000 he knows is hidden somewhere. And it's
Yeah.
just like a really dark movie, but it was really good. Like it was, it's one of those like kind of underrated cult like classic movies that everyone had told me to check out, and I finally did, and I'm glad I did.
What's it called again?
It's called The Night of the Hunter.
I'll make sure to check that out.
Yeah, it's really good. It came out in like 1955, I think. But it was a really interesting movie.
Was that in black and white or no?
Yeah, it was in black and white.
Nice, nice. Now, going on to filmmaking, job, right? I guess we like to
Hmm.
call it because I like to, we all have, especially us filmmakers and creatives, we have this, we have our passion, right? Our passion work, and then we have our not so passion work, right? So,
Yeah.
where do you fall in that kind of category, right? Like, are you, because I see you have your Tony Productions, right? And we'll get into that, but what, as for myself, right? I have my work, right? Where, you know, at the same time, I have my passion work, right? Where, like, my goal is to continue doing my passion work, and eventually I can live off of that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, talk to us about that passion versus reality a little bit.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely been a interesting and tough road at the same time with that. So, really going like when I got out of college, because I went to film school, and when I got out from college, I was having like a lot of really early success that like was really interesting because I made my senior thesis film, and that was getting a pretty good play in like a couple different film festivals. It was even at some film festival in Greece at the time, and that was back in
Okay.
2012.
Nice.
So yeah, so it was really cool. It was really exciting. Um, and then at the same time, being in Baltimore, we don't really get a lot of bigger productions here, but
Yeah.
I managed to get on as like a production assistant for a film called Better Living Through Chemistry, which was, I think it was a couple $1 million picture. I mean, at the time it was Olivia Wilde was in it, Sam Rockwell was in it. So it had some,
Okay. Yeah, it
yeah, it
was
had some,
you got some it was a film, right?
yeah,
With A
exactly.
actors.
Yeah. So I was like a production assistant on that, and everything was going pretty good. But at the time, I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we kind of decided that it was time to move out and everything. So I was 23 when I or going on 23 when I moved out from my parents' place, and then life just I mean came very quickly. Rent
It
started
came
happening.
Yeah, it came slamming hard. That's what
It
happens,
did.
man.
It really, really did. And so I had this like all this creative stuff that was going really well, but I mean, that was giving me zero income, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I sort of was just kind of trying to find my way for a little bit there. I was, doing the occasional like corporate gig because I had gotten tuned into a guy who was running a corporate video studio from a friend of a friend. So I was getting a few of those, and what really happened was, my cousin, she got married and asked me to film the wedding. And so I had, that under my belt, and I was sort of like, okay, well, maybe I'll try,
Yeah,
advertising that.
the wedding trap. That, I mean, we all fall into that. It's just funny cuz I've, you know, from everybody I've talked to, especially, filmmakers, is that we all start with weddings. It's just
Hmm.
funny. It's just funny, man.
It
Go
is.
ahead.
It's so interesting because it's just I feel like no matter who you are in the industry of things, it just comes for some random reason. Like with me, it's like a family member will say, "I'm getting married," and then
Yeah.
next thing you know, you'll have this moment where you'll be like, "Wow, okay, I could do that a couple more times and make some money off of that," and then yeah, it's the trap.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes sense, right? Because, wedding, depending on, the type of budget and how much you're charging, it could be a good payout, right? One
Hmm.
wedding, that could be a paycheck for many, so
Yeah, and that's
depends.
sort of that's sort of what happened was, I had a it was actually through a local Craigslist thing. This guy reached out to me who was a wedding photographer, and he was like, "Hey, I'm trying to expand my business into video. I can pay you, X amount of dollars to do a wedding for me." And he was like, I got like 5 or 6 of these already lined up if you want to jump on. And, I was just like, all I saw was dollar signs. So I was just like, yes,
Yeah.
sir, let's do this.
Okay. Okay.
And,
So like, with everything that you've gone through, right, from that time,
hmm
where are you now, right? Where do you fit in the scale of things, right? Because you've done a lot of growing and you're still growing. You're 30, so, there's a lot of stuff that I know you want to do. But right now, looking back from when you graduated, because in 2012 I also graduated from college,
oh,
but
cool.
yeah, I was more in communications media studies.
hmm
But I had a particular goal in mind, right? It was, oh, I'll be, behind the scenes, or I'll be in the film studio doing my thing. But looking back, right, in retrospect, are you where you want to be or where you expected to be 9 years ago?
Oh, I mean, I feel like by now I kind of was telling myself that I would be a little further along with things.
Yeah.
Uh, but I made the hard transition. I took those steps, which like even looking back on that a few years ago, making that sort of hard decision, I'm very happy that I did it because now I'm pushing at like every day, as much as I can to try to get further into my career. And I've been making a
Hmm.
lot of like strides, especially over this past year. So it
Isn't
wasn't an
that
easy
isn't it?
decision.
Yeah. I want to talk. Sorry, I want to talk to you about.
Hmm.
You mentioned this past year. Wasn't it? I mean, at least for me, but wasn't it? Didn't last year? 2020. The year that it was. Did that push you a little more?
Oh, hell yeah. I mean,
Right.
COVID was the best, worst thing that could have happened for me
Hmm.
personally
Yeah.
because it forced me to slow down. That was the big thing. And it forced me to I'd been telling myself I wanted to write like a feature film script forever, and I was like, now's the time, man. Like,
Yeah.
we're sitting here, we got all this extra spare time. Things are just because for me, I pretty much saw my calendar just disappear in about 2 weeks in March.
Yeah.
So I had the extra space to do this, and so I just started writing, and by December, I had the script all finished, and it was
Nice.
something I don't know if I would
Congratulations.
have done. Thanks, man. It was a big to do, but yeah, I don't think it would have happened under any kind of other circumstances. And even if I've always told myself like even if the script just kind of stagnates for a while, like I have that experience now, and going to write the next one is not going to be nearly as difficult because I've already done it once.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you have a feature under your belt that you wrote already, right? So you could, you know, pitch it. You could send a treatment to someone, but you have it under your belt, man. So, that's a big thing, right? So, are you planning on actually making it happen anytime soon?
Yeah, so right now I'm in the pitching phase. I actually just recently through this event called Movie Expo, I did like a virtual pitch session where they basically you're in a Zoom call, and they give you a 10-minute time limit. So I had 10 minutes with three different producers back to back to back to pitch the movie. And
Oh wow.
yeah, it was a gauntlet of an experience, I'll say that. So unfortunately, at meeting with them, it was all kind of no's from them so far. But there's still a chance that like one of the producers could see it and contact me or whatever. But even with that, I was like, I learned a lot because a lot of them were very helpful with like what they thought about the pitch and what they thought about the story. So it was a huge like growing experience, and now I feel 10 times more confident that I did, going into that. So I'm thankful that I at least got to just have that real life producer meeting experience like I did with that.
Sweet. Now, can you give us a little like one sentence of what your film is about?
It's basically about the end of a tumultuous relationship for a young couple in the early 90s. So my
Hmm.
my quick log line is like, Nirvana meets Blue Valentine is sort of the thought process behind it, because the story structure is pretty similar to how Blue Valentine goes, if you ever seen that film.
Okay. Okay. So I mean, I hope your goal to get it kind of set would be a dream come true, right? Imagine just you get at least even if it's an independent, right? So it's just to get that on the big screen. That's something that'll be nice.
Yeah, and it's been cool because I've sort of taken a step back since that whole experience a couple weeks ago, and I've started reaching out to a couple really good like directors that I know. Because on one hand, I can see myself like directing the film, but on another hand, I'm very open with like finding people who have more strength than I do. So I'm
Hmm.
like completely open to saying, hey, I really brought my skills as a writer to this story. I can visually see the way I want to do it, but I'm also intrigued by like someone that I feel is a even better director than I am, sort of taking the reins with it.
Yeah.
Um, and so still being involved with it, maybe as more on a like a executive producer type of scale. But I always am of the mindset that like the way that you make something great, especially in film, is you just have to kind of surround yourself with people that the skill set matches your own in the regard of what you're bringing to the table. So
Yeah.
I try to go into it with that sort of mentality of like, hey, if there's somebody I think that is just like this amazing director, and I've seen several short films they've done, and they blow me away each time, then if that person is interested in the story and wants to bring their take on it, then that'd be pretty cool.
No, that's awesome. That sometimes we get stuck in our own head and we don't want to kind of share our actual work sometimes. And
Hmm.
I'll be honest, if putting a story that I have in my head and I put on paper and to give it to someone else takes a lot, because it's pretty much your baby, right? And
Exactly.
but what I found out is collaborating in this business is probably the best thing you could do, because going at it alone sometimes it's not even worth it. But that's kudos to you, man, because you're open to that, right? And that tells a lot about the people that want to work with you and will work with you. So just are you would you rather be a director behind the camera, like a DP, or a writer?
Well, writing comes just so natural to me. So, of course, like I love that aspect of it. And I would love to direct and everything like that. I mean, I've done DP work, I've done my own shorts where I've like DP'd them myself, and I feel
Hmm.
like I have a pretty good grasp on it. But for me, it's so weird, and I've talked about this a few times to people where it's just I have this like thing where I can write something and it comes out like just so easy, but
Hmm.
then the translation to like imagining the shot selections and the angles and all that stuff, like the way I would make a film is I would have to do a ton of like storyboarding and pre-production because I'm not that person who can imagine like the shots and the perspectives like on the fly. So
Mm.
like I it just doesn't translate in my brain that way. So
Yeah.
once I get it
That's
down on the storyboard, like it's there and I can visualize it, but before that moment happens, like it's kind of just a jumbled mess in my head.
Yeah, I feel like I'm the opposite. It's hard for me to write. It's hard for
Hmm.
me to gather myself and to write. Even though I have the idea in my head, I have exactly how it's going to start and how it's going to end. But the one thing is the meat and potatoes, right? That's the
Hmm.
part that gets me. But if you give me a script, I guarantee you like in 5 minutes I could tell you the whole thing, like how it's gonna be shot, because I love to dive into that, like the potential of the possibility of grabbing an idea and putting it visually into
That's
into
amazing.
into a screen. So that's kind of like the opposite for me. So maybe we should collaborate someday,
I think so. I think we got the start of something here.
Yeah. So talk to us about 2020 Productions. Is that your production company?
Yeah, so it's my production company that sort of came out of it's named after my cousin Tony who passed away.
Okay, I was gonna
So
ask you that.
yeah, so when I was in college and sort of everybody was making up their like production company names at the time,
Hmm.
everybody was sort of either like, taking their initials or their name or just something like
Yeah.
that. And I just wanted it to have like a deeper meaning behind it. And so that's what I stuck with because I was just like, I knew it would be obviously a deeper meaning, but I also knew it would be a great way of like motivating me to sort of always try to do like my best work and my best things in life. Because I would always like see his name and I would never kind of like forget the memory that was kind of built into all that.
That's awesome, and that's a good reminder, right? Because it's
Hmm.
it's it's the name of your of your work, so That's awesome. So, are you doing anything as far as in regards like what's your as far as behind the scenes of that? Are you just creating short films? Are you collaborating? What are you guys doing over there?
Yeah, so, it's basically turned back into the creative entity that, I'd started it out with, because for a while it was like, it was the wedding company, and, for a long time, that's all like people regarded me as, especially locally. I was just like, that's the wedding guy. And I grew, grew to find that very annoying after a while.
Yeah,
But,
that's same here. It gets kind of cringing after a while.
yeah, I mean, especially when people that I worked with on like my senior thesis film, I had one person in particular that was like, "Hey, what are you doing now?" And I said I was doing weddings, and their reaction was just like, "Oh, that's a shame because you have way more talent than that." And I was like, "Ooh, that
Yeah,
hits."
yeah.
um, but yeah, so currently, right now, it's obviously working on trying to get this feature off the ground, and then more recently, I actually started focusing more on like the blog writing aspect of the website,
Okay.
and I've been reaching out to a lot of the indie filmmakers who are just churning out short films and maybe like really low budget indie features, and I've just been writing reviews and write ups of like these films, and it's been amazing because I've been able to meet filmmakers from all over the world and watch their stuff and just write about it. And some of it's really amazing, some of it is a little cringy at times, and a little bit in between. But it's just been an amazing kind of experience to feel like I'm dipping my toe back into the community aspect of it again,
Okay.
and back into that like collaboration kind of mentality because I'm able to, share my thoughts. And a lot of these people otherwise wouldn't have either they wouldn't have been able to get reviews, or they wouldn't have been able to get like true I kind of break down opinions about like what they're creating. So even when I have, kind of a film that's not so great or has some like flaws to it, I'll talk about these things, and then they'll respond like, "Hey, thank you so much because I kind of had a feeling that maybe I was doing this or that wrong, but now that I got this sort of objective view of it, it's really helping me out and everything." So it's been a really cool experience just doing these write ups. And I always tell people, it's like, I'm not no authority. So, if I say something bad or something negative, like, don't get bummed out about it because I'm just another dude on the internet with an opinion. Like, take
Yeah,
that for what it is.
that's true. Maybe you should go check out my write a review on my film, man. See, I want to get your thoughts on it.
Please do. I'd be happy to check it out and do a write up. Like the blog's been taking off pretty good, so it's been really fun just like doing all these different films and being able to connect. So I'd love to.
Perfect. I'll send you the link after. But
Awesome.
something I want to talk to here as we're wrapping up here.
Hmm.
So you have your own show, right? I don't know if it's a podcast, but it's very unique. It's called Inside the Lines, and you're talking to your guest, but you guys are coloring something, or you guys are like coloring a coloring book, right, or something. That's pretty unique. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so that was a show that I did, that was kind of going right up until everything happened with the pandemic last year, and
Yeah,
it was a lot of fun, and it was so funny because I've been renovating my house here, and one day I was renovating, I was redoing the hardwood floors that are to the house, and I could remember being a kid, and like one of those things you would do as a kid is just you'd color in a coloring book, and it was a very kind of easy way to sort of like break down boundaries. You could just kind of tune out color and sort of just chat away.
yeah,
And it sort of struck me that was like, well, why don't you like I try that for like a show or something? So yeah, it was just this idea of like sitting down with a guest, and I'm sure you've dealt with it too, but a lot of times, over the years when I've done corporate work or documentary work, one of the biggest things you hear from people is just like, oh, once the camera's on, like I get so nervous and everything. And
yeah,
it was, to me, it was that natural sort of way to eliminate that with people too. So it was like
yeah,
really cool to just be able to to sit down with somebody in color, because yeah, it does. You just sort of take away all the nerves and all the energy that's kind of like the jitters and everything. And
Plus,
so,
I feel like it's just like if I didn't know, right? Like let's say I don't know nothing about the show, but you
mhm.
like we start off like, oh, we're gonna color, so it's gonna throw the guests off, kind of off, but like kind of like they completely forget that they're actually being interviewed. You know?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like it was a lot of fun. And I mean, the only thing that really took the wind out of the sails was, at the time I was really trying to get like sponsors or people to sort of help out with the cost of the show, because it was all really out of pocket stuff. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, just, it was starting to get some momentum with people. But then, of course, once the pandemic happened, it was like everybody's wallets, tightened up naturally. And so
Yeah.
it just sort of fizzled out after that. But it's something I'd love to like revisit maybe in another couple years or so, because yeah, it got a lot of good play here locally in Baltimore, and a lot of people really enjoyed it. So I'd love to sort of take another stab at it, maybe with better marketing sensibilities the next time
No.
around.
No. Yeah. Definitely continue that.
Mhm.
Obviously with everything, the whole, we can't really interact, which sucks, but that's kind of like the whole part, that like the point of the show, right? So,
Mhm.
but definitely continue that, man. That's something that's unique. You could take it a step further, and who else, who knows what you could do, right? But definitely, yeah, pursue that, man. That's a dope concept, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. I always kind of like imagined, this version of it that would be on like a Vice type of avenue or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be. It could definitely be like even like a segment for something. Like it doesn't have to
Hmm.
be a whole full thing, but definitely. That's something where you could definitely have somebody, create value, or get a sponsor from that. That's so just keep that baby locked in your arms, man.
Thanks, man.
So as we're wrapping up here, what's your goal for the next couple months here as we're headed towards the summer? What does Daniel want to kind of get accomplished this year?
Yeah, so, the big thing is I'd love to sort of solidify, some producers or something like that for the feature film. That would be amazing. Um, and then, right now I'm working on sort of the next book that I'm doing, and it's, I'm writing like a full-on novel now. So I'm working
Nice.
on that, which I want to just keep doing through the summer. And then, I'm hoping to maybe write another couple like short film scripts. I'm working on a couple like treatments right now for things like that are maybe feature, maybe shorts. So yeah, just kind of keeping the momentum of writing, and then continuing with like the reviews on the blog. I've managed to like get in with a few different publications through that avenue, so that's been really cool. So
Okay.
just kind of keeping the wheels turning, and being my typical workaholic self over here.
That's what we got to do, man.
Uh
Where
huh.
can where can we find you on social media?
So the easiest thing to do, I always say, is just the website, which is just twotonyproductions.com. And from there, you can sort of find all the links to. I'm on Instagram with just at Two Tony Productions, and then I have a personal Facebook and a personal like LinkedIn page for all that.
Perfect, perfect. So, Daniel, I feel like, we got a lot out of this, and a lot of, the audience can really relate to, some of the stuff that, you've been through, man. So, I hope, you keep on inspiring others, and I know you inspired me for sure. So, keep at it, man. And I hope, to, probably work on something soon, man.
Yeah, man, that would be great. Any excuse, like if I can get out on the West Coast for a little bit, sure thing. I'm down for it anytime.
Hey, man, the sun's out over here, man. It's perfect. Summertime's coming out. So, hopefully everything gets back to normal as it's looking like. So, we'll see.
Yeah, man, fingers crossed. It's getting there slowly but surely.
All right, Daniel. We'll see you on the next one. Have a good one.
All right, thanks. You too.
All right. And don't forget to subscribe and check out the latest episodes on the website. Follow us on social media at Hardwood Rod. And don't forget, every Tuesday we got the latest and greatest. So stay locked in. Would you like to be on the podcast? Got something to talk about? make sure to head over to the website at hardwoodrod.com. Leave your name and the topic you'd like to discuss, and I'll add you to the calendar.